From Michaela Maroney being disrespected by her own performance, to Simone Biles being called a national embarrassment for taking some time off, these are the most disrespectful moments in gymnast history. For starters, there's the time when Michaela Maroney felt disrespected by her own performance. Now, this moment is downright iconic. After all, it became infamous, and not for the reason you'd think. Turns out, when you're Michaela Maroney, your standards are so incredibly high that you outright feel disrespected by your own performance, even if you manage to achieve silver. That's exactly what happened to her in 2012's London Olympics. You see, Maroney was the fan favorite that year, and just about everyone was expecting her to take home the gold in the women's vault competition. And while her first vault was downright perfect, she ended up stumbling on her second one. She underextended and literally landed in a sitting position with the judges right there in front of her. Sheesh. She wasn't able to retain her high score after that. And well, in the end, she got silver instead of gold. What makes this moment one for the history books, though, is the absolute look of disappointment and disrespect that Maroney had on her face as she accepted that silver. I mean, it quite literally became a famous internet meme back in 2012. That's how viral it got. Of course, Michaela didn't blame the judges. In fact, she was mostly disappointed in her own performance. But it just goes to show that when you're an athlete as dedicated as she is, you're bound to be your harshest critic. But that's far from the only disrespectful moment in gymnast history. Because after all, Michaela Skinner exists. Some people think Skinner is by far the most disrespectful gymnast ever. And honestly, it's not too hard to see why. It's like she's just looking for one controversy after the other. I mean, who can forget the time when after the 2016 Olympic trials, she was under fire for some remarks that were downright racist? These were aimed at Gabby Douglas. And let's just say, Michaela reached a completely new low when she said these things. The gymnast shared a picture on her Twitter feed where she photoshopped her own face onto Gabby Douglas's body. Now, that's weird enough. But wait till you hear this next bit. Turns out, she accompanied her already disrespectful post with a couple of emojis that were completely out of line. One of these was the monkey emoji. And I think you probably just get what kind of insinuation she was trying to make there. Needless to say, it was completely gross, and her fans thought so too. She received a lot of hate for that tweet, with one fan saying that this was just one of the many instances where Skinner has shown that she's a straight-up racist. I mean, there's really no denying it in this case, right? Plus, people also called her out on being really bitter. While Skinner did eventually apologize for the tweet, I think it was pretty clear to everyone that this was just a lackluster attempt at some damage control. But that's not even the only time Skinner's displayed a complete lack of sensitivity. I mean, let's not forget when she completely disrespected the COVID-19 guidelines. It's one thing to make decisions that can harm you, but to not take something like COVID seriously, well, that's a whole new level of disrespect. Though that's pretty much what she did. You see, after she contracted the virus in December 2020, some people reported seeing her in public places. People heavily criticized her for this because not only was she putting others at risk, but she was also not following the laid-out guidelines and rules for COVID-19. She was also accused of not taking the pandemic seriously enough, because in a tweet, the gymnast said that she doesn't have to worry about it, since the coronavirus probably won't survive through a full floor routine like she can. I mean, not only does that just not make any sense, but it was completely out of touch. Especially when you consider this terrible joke was made at the peak of COVID-19. In one of the replies, a Twitter follower of hers called her out on it and mentioned just how insensitive this tweet was, especially because there'd been a few athletes who required intensive care after contracting COVID. So it's not like Skinner was immune to it just because she was a gymnast. And let's say that she was asymptomatic. She'd still be a carrier and could pass it on to other people if she wasn't careful. But of course, Michaela, being herself, didn't care about any of this. Now, this next gymnast got to know firsthand just what it's like to be disrespected in front of the whole world. Yup, I'm talking about Jordyn Wieber. Now, to get the full scoop for this moment, I'm going to have to take you back to 2012. At this point in her career, Jordyn had pretty much become the talk of the town when it came to gymnastics. In fact, everyone thought she'd qualify for the London Olympics with no problems at all. But turns out, that's not what happened. In fact, the athlete ended up getting massively disrespected by the Olympic system. This caused her to miss out on the opportunity of a lifetime. So just what happened? Well, as it turns out, the Olympics has this rule where only 2 athletes from a specific country can qualify for a specific category. So that meant that only 2 gymnasts could qualify from the USA. Jordan managed to pass her trials with flying colors. But guess what? 2 Americans had already qualified, which meant that the gymnast was pretty much asked to pack her bags and go home. I mean, I get why the rule exists, but the fact that it led to someone like Jordan missing out on what could have been the highlight of her career, well, that must have stung her quite a lot. Especially when you consider that the athlete had the necessary skill needed to qualify. She just didn't make it because of her team. Oof, that's a level of disrespect you don't see often. But of course, there are plenty of other such moments across gymnast history, like the 2011 U.S. Classic Championships, where Chelsea Memel was utterly disrespected due to a rejection. So, back then, Memel suffered a pretty terrible injury, where she ended up dislocating her shoulder. Ouch. Now that's bad enough. But little did she know, things were going to get a lot worse for her. Because after a while, she actually managed to make a decent comeback and was gearing up to qualify for the 2012 London Olympics. But the committee had other plans, and she got banned from competing. Can you imagine that? She spent months of her life in recovery, with the idea of competing in the Olympics probably being the main thing that pushed her forward. And after she finally got so close to qualifying, she was outright denied the opportunity. It's a level of disrespect I hope no other athlete has to face in their career. So, just why was she denied? Well, turns out there wasn't any definitive reason, at least nothing that was actually legitimate. Obviously, this caused a ton of controversy at the time because people thought it wasn't just a slap on Memel's face, but also pointed to a much larger issue with hypocrisy. Though even with fan outcry, in the end, she sadly wasn't able to qualify. And so this whole controversy went down as an incredibly disrespectful moment, not just in Chelsea's career, but also in gymnast history. Though it's not always gymnasts that are disrespecting each other. Sometimes it's the fans who are being outright disrespectful. Like the time when Simone Biles decided she needed to take a break from gymnastics. Apparently, all her entitled fans thought she was in the wrong for doing this, even though the reason why she needed time off was literally for her mental health. Now, imagine how much worse her mental health must have gotten when she also had thousands of haters online disrespecting her for her choice. Some people really need a class on how to be empathetic, because it's pretty pathetic to call out someone who's just trying to take care of their well-being. Of course, it wasn't just random people on Twitter who were calling her out. Even public figures like Piers Morgan felt the need to share his opinion, calling her decision horrific. Sheesh, isn't this going just a little bit too far? But hey, that's par for the course for Piers, I guess. Especially because he didn't stop there. He said it was a disgrace to the sport. Biles faced a ton of backlash at the time, and all this constant hounding was from people who probably couldn't even do a quarter of the stuff that Simone can. Some other guys like Aaron Wright even went as far to call Simone selfish and mentioned that she was a national embarrassment. I mean, there's just no other way to put this, but by calling it utter disrespect. Hopefully, Simone didn't let all these naysayers get to her and took the time off she needed to better adjust her mental health. But from Simone Biles being called a national embarrassment for just taking some time off, to Michaela Maroney being disrespected by her own performance, those were the most disrespectful moments in gymnast history.